While it's taken longer than I was hoping for, we're finally seeing a bunch of stunning high refresh rate OLED monitors like this one from AOC hitting the market. This is the AG276QZD, a 27-inch 1440p 240Hz OLED gaming monitor with a supposedly pretty budget price tag. Naturally, being an OLED panel, it's likely that the same actual panel that the likes of LG, Asus and Corsair are already using, with a few tweaks from the good folks at AOC. So, let's see if this, what this can do and if it's worth the still pretty hefty price tag. I'll start with the physical, since that's the thing that's most likely to be different. AOC have gone for a rather interesting design here. The panel itself is in a ludicrously thin metal housing, which is then tacked onto what kind of looks like a 22-inch monitor body from the back when you view it that way. Either way, you've got a funky non-symmetric RGB ring, which yes, you can disable fully in the menu if you want to, and the usual downward-facing I/O. That being two HDMI 2.0 ports capable of 1440p at 144Hz, and two DisplayPort 1.4 ports which can do the full 1440p at 240Hz. Plus two USB 3 ports as a hub, with one of them, the yellow one, being a charging port. On the stand front, you get all of the adjustability you would expect. Height, tilt, swivel, and even rotation into portrait mode. The only thing that bugs me, and it bugs me way more than it really should do, but it does, is the foot of the stand. It's not symmetric. It's the same as the shape on the back of the monitor. I noticed it and I just can't unsee it. Luckily, it comes with a VESA mount adapter in the box, so you can just mount it to a monitor arm if it bothers you as much as it does for me. The panel itself is a WOLED with a somewhat unfortunate pixel layout. It's WRGB, or actually RWGB specifically, meaning that you not only have the red, green and blue LEDs you might expect, but a white one too. This, in theory, can offer better brightness and take the strain off of the RGB LEDs, but it translates to a somewhat poor usage experience, especially with text. The smaller the text, the more pronounced and frankly irritating it is. You get this sort of smeared, blurry effect that sort of adds a level of pixelation to the text, and it's something that is painfully obvious from the second you boot the monitor up. To be clear, this mostly does just affect text, not content consumption or gaming. But seeing as this is a monitor, I thought I should mention it. The other thing you should know about WOLEDs is that they have a fairly strong adaptive brightness limiter, or ABL. Basically, to try and make the LEDs last as long as possible, you can't let them get too hot. The more light you push out of them, the hotter they get, and so the less lifespan they have. So these panels will flash you with as much light as they can, and then rather quickly ramp that back down to a more comfortable level. My open source response time tool shows this really well. You can see the final light level is nowhere near where it was at the peak, and it's actually pretty quick to pull back down. This actually makes it less obvious, weirdly enough, compared to the older LG OLED panels that took like seconds to dim, making it annoyingly obvious. The only thing that was sort of surprised me here is that the adaptive brightness limiter was still active even down at like 30% screen brightness. That's maybe 60 nits once it settles. That's kind of disappointing, as I would expect it to only cut off the worst of the peaks rather than what seems to be a fixed dimming regardless of your brightness. Now, since we're here, I'll mention that the response times are instant as you would expect, and the input lag is pretty spot on too. Functionally, all of the results were under 1 frame, so I'm happy in saying that this is a great choice, at least on the latency front. Which I suppose brings us nicely onto the gaming experience. It's pretty hard to argue against this thing for gaming. While the brightness isn't exactly perfect, for fast-paced FPS games where 240Hz, the 240Hz refresh rate and the instant response times make it actually make a real difference, this is an excellent experience. It's hard to get a better experience, really, as long as you're in darker environments. It's fast, responsive, and super low latency. What more could you ask for? If HDR gaming is what you're after, you might be a bit disappointed though. The complete lack of brightness makes for a honestly kind of worse than average experience. Obviously you have perfect blacks, but the lack of highlights does mean that it's a less than ideal experience. Still, even for other game genres, you should have a great time with this. I enjoyed a bit of, frankly, poorly driven Assetto Corsa. My excuse here is that I was using the keyboard to drive, but yeah, sure. Anyway, in short, it is a great gaming experience. Colors-wise, visually it looks stunning, and it comes with a report in the box to show you that it's been tested and calibrated. I measured pretty much spot on AOC's claimed figures, that being about 97% of the DCI-P3 spectrum, although my Spider X2 couldn't handle the WOLED, as Datacolor mentioned. In fact, review of the Spider X2 in the cards above for you. For the accuracy measurements, reporting a just wildly inaccurate delta E of 9.99 on average. I'm inclined to believe the 1.59 on the calibration report here. There is one last thing we need to talk about here, and that's price and competition. At an MSRP of $999, it's, in theory anyway, has a decent price advantage over its equally spec'd counterparts. The problem is that those counterparts, namely the LG 27GR95QE-B, is, at least currently anyway, on sale for just £750. That's a full £100 cheaper than I can find the AG276QZD has ever been listed at, and £250 cheaper than its MSRP. Hell, even the Asus PG27AQ-DM is currently on sale from Asus's eStore at £899. That one in particular is meant to be the best version of this panel, so you'd likely want to spend your cash there instead. If you can get a good deal on this one, it's a fantastic gaming experience for sure, although if I'm being fully honest, the Philips Evnia 8600 that I've swapped to using as my primary display is arguably a better option than pretty much any of those. It's a proper RGB panel, a QD OLED panel specifically, and while it does have a slightly lower refresh rate at 175Hz, it doesn't have a harsh brightness limiter, and so stays more consistent at the various brightness levels that you set. Text looks crisp, and in games, well, it games like a dream. It's also around the same price, or you can get the same panel from people like Alienware for a little less too, if you prefer. But of course, that's just my thoughts anyway. And as one final note, it's worth mentioning that this is literally the first crop of OLED monitors that we've had in the market, and that comes with a bit of an early adopter tax. These being relatively limited in brightness in particular is something that feels to me like one of the more noticeable downsides just in straight specs, let alone burn-in and lifespan. And so it's hard to overly recommend any of those monitors, at least right now, and at least at this still remarkably high price. Of course, again, those are my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. What do you think about this new crop of OLED panels, this one in particular, and the Evnia that I use, and your preference between those two? I'd love to hear your thoughts in those comments down below. If you're interested, of course, I will leave a link to this in the description down below if you want to check it out. Check out pricing when I watch this, because it can and is different depending on where you are. Otherwise, if you want to see more videos like this one, you can hit the subscribe button, check out that bell notification icon too. If you want to see more videos like this, I have plenty up on the channel already, so hit the playlist on the end cards. And if you want to be able to test things like monitors, peripherals, I make my own hardware, the open source latency and response time tools. Those are available at osrtt.com, and that's linked in the description as well. Otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you all in the next video.